What's going on, everyone? It's Justin here, and today I'm really excited to bring you a detailed review of the Mercedes EQS 580 fully electric car. We've had this car for about a week, and I've been able to really integrate it into my daily lifestyle and see what it's really like to drive Mercedes' first electric car. And we're going to be talking about the interior, the exterior, some of the little features here and there that I may have noticed, things that I like and don't like about it, and whether or not I would switch to a fully electric car. Right. I know these are pretty hard to come by right now, especially at a retail price. So if you guys want to check and see if there's one available near you, just go ahead and visit vinauto.ca and type in the car, the model, and check if there's any options available near you. This right here is the top end model. There are other options available in different regions, but the S580 in particular has the maximum power. 4.3 seconds gets you 0 to 100 kilometers, and on a full charge you have over 500 kilometers of range, but that does depend on the different modes that you select on the dynamic selection options. And it's powered by a dual synchronous motor. It gives you over 500 horsepower and the equivalent of over 600 foot-pounds of torque. So there is just so much power in it. But when you take a look at the outside, which is the first thing that we're going to talk about, it actually looks like very friendly, very muted and calm. And to be honest, I'm a little bit mixed on whether or not I like the exterior look. The car itself is pretty big. It has like that presence. It's just about 130 inches in its length. And starting out with the front, this is probably the area that I do like. It has like kind of this, like, I don't know, soft rounding on the front that may be a little bit similar to the Tesla Model S, but I think it looks a little bit better. Even as someone who drives a Mercedes CLA 45, which is like a sportier car, as like my daily car, I found that I had to be just as careful about the clearance on this car. But otherwise, I do feel like it looks quite sleek. Your camera is integrated right here. One thing that was kind of funny though, and we were trying to figure out, was whether or not this car has a frunk, because it doesn't have an engine, and so most electric cars do have some cargo space on the front that people love to take advantage of, and unfortunately, you don't have a frunk here. Even though it is like a very long nose, I would say like it would have been nice to have one, but it doesn't exactly need one, because as you're going to see in the rear, there's 22 cubic feet of space, which is plenty. And as we go along to the back, I feel like it just like kind of flattens out a bit funny. It does look a little bit bulky, but I'm just not a big fan of the rear. What I do like though is there is so much space. It is a hatchback. You have this like screen there, but you could fit a full set of golf clubs. You could see we have a whole bunch of camera gear, tripods, and all that kind of stuff. And for a car of this length and with the amount of legroom that it already has, to be able to fit like 4 large luggages in the back of this car is really nice. So, I mean, that's a great feature that like the Porsche Taycan really missed the mark on, including the Cross model. There just wasn't much space at all in either models of that car. But as you can probably tell by now, this really is an S580 turned into an electric model. The interior has a lot of the same cues that we're gonna talk about, but it's more of a futuristic form in every way. The front of this car is all rounded off and it has a very different design from the S580, but in terms of the size proportions, the rear and everything, they've definitely brought a lot of those same features, and that makes total sense. So for someone who loved the S580, of course, I was going to like this experience, but let's go ahead and talk about the interior in more detail. So now we're in the interior of the EQS 580, and this is hands down what makes this car potentially the best luxury electric car on the market right now in its class. It's almost not even close. And to be honest, even though I have checked out some great electric cars, even in the premium tier, the interior of the EQS 580 is just second to none, and it takes all the great features of the S-Class and more specifically the recent S580 and just blends it into an extremely futuristic and tech-intuitive interface, which I do have a few comments about overall, but from an aesthetic standpoint and from a feel, every time you enter this car, it just screams luxury and comfort as its top priority in conjunction with all of its driving tech that we're gonna get to after we go over the interior details. This is the color combination of the white and the navy blue, and when I first saw it on the list, I thought it was like maybe a bit of an odd combination, but after seeing it in person, I think it goes very well together, and I specifically love the diamond stitch configuration of this color option. You take a look at the deviated stitching throughout here, it just travels all the way along, and I think the easiest way to describe this interior is that it is just so uniform and seamless, which is a word that I use a lot in tech, but I found I've used more recently in vehicles as well, and this one is just the best embodiment of that term. You see how it like comes up here with the dash, it just flows all the way along, but most importantly, I love how the lines travel all the way along the side of the cockpit, and with the glass extending outwards a little bit, you see the nice reflection in the details of the Burmester speaker element that is tucked away to the left here, but it also just like slopes downwards with no seam whatsoever, because traditionally in cars, you'll find like just a bit of like a lip before there's like the window, but in this case, because the window drops below the slope line of the leather finish, it just looks so much better. And as I'm driving this car, I almost feel like I'm in like a luxury boat or in business class on the best airline in the world, or just sitting in the living room and coasting around the road, because the electric car experience is definitely like quite smooth. And as you know, Mercedes has been huge on LEDs. I have it on my CLA 45, which is more of like a sports car, but one of the reasons why I got it is because of how nice the accent LEDs are, being a tech person, but also in the S580. And what has been seen here, you're gonna find more LEDs in this car than in any other car on the market, because it just, once again, carries all the way around. It goes along the side here, and the seamless like animations kind of flow along as you're driving, and that is very prominent at night. But you'll also find like LED glows below the like footrests. There's also some in the storage compartments, behind the seats, and even on the seat belts, there's like a red highlight that lets you know exactly where it is. So LEDs are a huge part of the luxurious and moody feel that Mercedes has brought over. Perhaps my favorite thing though is just how open concept this is. There's like a glass like sky roof that is in two separate parts here, but also the fact that the windows are so big and also have this extended piece here. I usually don't really like white interiors, but I think for this model specifically, if you're going with an EQS, the white interior is the option that just really screams futuristic. Of course, another huge feature is that 56-inch MBUX hyperscreen in the middle. I've been a little bit critical of the Mercedes MBUX system in the past as a Mercedes owner. I've always found some weird quirks of it just being a little bit complicated to navigate, maybe having too many specific features that like the average person who is not very familiar with a tech interface is able to figure out. And what I can say here is that there are still some of those quirks, but for the most part, it is relatively straightforward. On the spec side of things, you have a 12-inch display in front of the steering wheel. You have a 17-inch display in the middle here, which is OLED, and you also have another 12-inch passenger display that is also OLED. It truly does feel like you're living in a different generation. The center screen here has what you're used to. You have your climate controls and the general menu that stays on the bottom here as it slopes down. But as you go over to the home menu, you'll also find the navigation. You have your EQ settings on the left here, and you can also pull down a tab that kind of allows you to control what you're currently on. And there's also Apple CarPlay, which is located on the top. And I'm glad to report that unlike on some models, including my daily car, it does cover the entire screen. I know I got a lot of questions about that. So I do like how they've simplified it, and the only area where I found it to be a little bit confusing is just that from the passenger screen, you're able to control a lot of the same things that you are from the main screen. So say the driver is focusing on the road and you want to like set something a little bit more specific, you can do that from the secondary display, but I did find that it was occasionally just a little bit glitchy in communicating with that main display that something is actively being controlled on the passenger display. It just had like a slight delay there. What I'm trying to say is they've done a good job here, but we're still so early in electric cars, and this is just going to keep getting better. Cars are going to get a lot smarter, but from a luxury standpoint, this car is just so unbelievably amazing to drive around. And whether you're sitting in the front and back or you're in the driver's seat, you're going to have an absolutely incredible experience. So before we move on, I want to give a huge thanks to the sponsor of this video, Newton, which is a great low-cost crypto trading platform for Canadians. What's awesome about this is that it is available on all different platforms, whether you're on iOS, Android, or desktop, and it is an absolutely beautiful interface to be able to check all of your different crypto investments. Newton has over 70 cryptocurrencies that you can buy and sell on their platform, and they're constantly adding new coins. Newton also offers many different network options so you can save on gas fees. You can set up and fund your account in minutes, and what's great about this is that there's third-party custody, instant verification, competitive spreads, access to high liquidity, and no commission fees. You can also customize widgets to be able to analyze information in a way that is effective and also visually appealing, specific to your needs. It is also low cost to buy and sell on Newton with transparent prices that are always shown on their website. So if you guys want to go ahead and check out Newton for yourself, I'm going to drop a link down below. When you sign up for Newton and place your first $100 to trade, you get $25 deposited into your Newton account. The referral link's in the description. So now we're in the back seat, and this is an absolute treat to be able to spend time back here, and there are so many things that you could do, and I feel like a lot of people who do purchase like S-Class vehicles are either living in a busy city, or maybe you're a realtor, and the car essentially becomes your second office. Whether you're taking phone calls, you want to whip out your laptop and get some work done, a car like this really allows for the amount of space to spend a lot of effective time in the car, both in comfort, to rest, or to get work done. I personally don't have to worry about legroom, but Damien on our team is 6'5", and he always has issues with legroom when we're traveling or in any small car. His head is touching the ceiling, and with this, you can literally stretch out entirely and still feel like you have so much room to spare. As you're sitting on each side here, it just has like your own zone, but at the same time, the middle is still kept nicely open, and you can have a meal back here, and I do wish there was an option to have like a tray table, for example. I've always wondered why more cars don't have that option, because it is definitely something that I would want to use. But in terms of like actual seat comfort, the same as the front, it has these quilted seats that are kind of nestled and angled backwards perfectly, and depending on the options you select, you have varying levels of customizability and massage functions, but your controls are just on the side here through like a touch capacitive panel. You also have individualized controls for the climate. There are vents along each side, and on the top here you have the reading lights and all that. You don't have like the privacy screen in the actual configuration that I have right here, but just in terms of pure space, especially with how much room there is in the rear, and the fact that it is a hatchback, it is really impressive. And just sitting back here and looking at the front with the LEDs that travel around and the large display is so awesome, but I equally enjoyed driving it as much. So now we're ready to hit the road, and we've spent so much time talking about the interior of the S580 and how nice it is, and we're going to continue talking about that throughout this drive. But when it comes to the actual driving experience, this car, just to recap, is able to do 0 to 60 miles per hour in 4.3 seconds, which is very impressive. And a lot of times when we're talking about like the S-Class and like the super luxury cars and just how nice the fit and finish and interior space is, you have to forget about, like, as a car and its driving function, how fast and how much power there is under the hood, because even while you're driving a car like this, it is so smooth and so quiet that it almost hides the amount of power that it is really able to produce, because it is just like something that floats on the road. But I'm going to turn this on and we're going to go for a bit of a drive. And I think what I've noticed after driving a few electric cars from the price range of about $50,000 to over $200,000 is that at its core, when you're moving around the city, there's kind of a common trend where it just like glides along. They're not meant to be extremely responsive or snappy, but they can be. And especially with an electric car of this class and speed, as soon as you give it some gas, it just flies, it pulls you back in your seat, and whoever bringing this car really notices that, like, they're just not expecting it. And I feel like that's the same kind of experience that you get of a Tesla for the very first time, except we're comparing very different vehicles here, where instead of having that like extreme speed, it feels like it ramps up very nicely, and at the same time, obviously the interior is just in another league here. The other thing that I've also really noticed is just how quiet the ride is. Everything is nicely sealed off, but as you drive around, you're able to notice your surroundings just by how big the windows are and how big the sunroof is, which are areas that I have like really enjoyed. But I just like the fact that you also feel separated from the outside world because it is so well sealed off. With the great Burmester 360 system, which by the way sounds incredible, both in the pure sound characteristics or in the 360 focus, you're able to just enjoy yourself here. And with the LED ambience that you're able to set in the different tones, the different gradients and moods and all that kind of stuff, it really does come together with its great interior finishes, which Mercedes has really showcased well in their vehicles. And it's the biggest reason that I personally choose to drive a Mercedes as my everyday car in like the most futuristic form possible. With so many screens along the front here, how does it feel from the driver's perspective? And I think it's interesting. Having a large screen in the middle is always a good thing, especially if you're looking at your maps and being able to navigate stuff, but at the same time you have an HUD and you also have a 12-inch display on the driver's view as well. And when I'm driving, I typically look at like the HUD for the most part, but having a map like this is really nice. And especially with CarPlay taking up the entire screen, that is something that I use and navigate all the time. But having the passenger screen also allows you to just like tell your friend or whoever's sitting there to change a certain setting or song to something that you would like. And when it came to the user input while driving, one thing that I did notice in the Mercedes S580 that we took around late last year was that Mercedes was really setting themselves up for the release of the EQS and kind of the direction of where the entire lineup was going, which is a smart and connected system that also works in conjunction obviously with MBUX. Everything was essentially touch capacitive in that S580, and it's kind of the same case here. There aren't many tactile buttons at all, and that is probably something that I'm just not a big fan of. I feel like while you're driving, you don't want to have to like tinker with the steering wheel and with the inputs kind of not always being able to register in the most accurate form because there are a lot of specific areas of the menu. I would have liked the nub at least on like the steering wheel to be a tactile version. And I understand in the future, everything will move towards like touch capacitive and buttons will essentially be eliminated. But I think in this day and age, while the software and the voice assist systems are still getting improved and developed over the years, I would still like to see some level of tactile. And I always enjoy the interiors that are well integrated in both a future-focused, smart, and touch system while still giving you areas of input that just make sense to still remain physical. With any electric car, of course, we also have to talk about the range. And this car is rated for over 340 miles or over 500 kilometers in ideal conditions. And the climate that I'm driving this car in is about 12 degrees Celsius. And anyone who's in America is going to have to do that conversion, but it's a generally, I guess, like cold temperature for people in most regions, but by no means is it like East Coast Canada kind of cold. And in terms of range, when it was dropped off to me for the first like part of the week, it was at about 350 kilometers in estimated range, and right now I'm at just about 192, and I would say that driving distance has been relatively accurate. I have it in like the normal mode. I don't have it set to like the sport mode specifically or the eco mode because I feel like with these electric cars, especially like the higher end models, you usually do want to drive it in like the normal mode. I don't have like the automatic start stop. It does have like a normal level of recuperation set. And based on those estimates, you would typically expect that the battery drains a little bit faster than its official rating, or quite a bit faster, just because it is not under like optimal testing conditions. In this case, I can say that for the most part, it is pretty close. I was able to get probably about 400 kilometers on a full charge, just driving in like the normal mode, mostly city driving, but a little bit of highway here and there and picking up the higher speeds. But for the most part, it was like a pretty average day, just doing like routines and stuff for the first week of having the car. So yeah, from like a range rating, it is actually very good for its class. It is able to charge relatively fast as well. And that depends on your different scenarios, whether you're using AC or DC and what is available around you. But in terms of like the electric car standard comparative to the other options, there aren't any like major drawbacks from Mercedes like first electric car. I think the reason why I've enjoyed this experience so much is that I really do feel like I'm driving something of the future here. I'm a huge fan of electric cars, both the interior side of things, the exterior, there's just a lot of like different designs out. And as someone who loves like design, vehicles, and technology, that makes things like very exciting for the years to come. It's going to be cool to see how brands that have been in the automotive industry for a very long time interpret this whole electric car future, and also the newcomers in the industry, which we've seen signs of through like VinFast. You've also seen traditional tech companies such as like Sony come up with prototypes of electric cars, and also the rumors of Apple. But what Mercedes has done here has been bringing all the things that make a Mercedes car great, legendary, and popular, and put it into a car that feels so futuristic because it literally feels like you're driving a spaceship in 2022. Being able to drive like a street-ready model here in Victoria, BC, which is like a pretty quiet town that you see some electric cars around, but nothing like crazy new or conceptual. Just feels very, very weird. And that is a testament to how good of a job Mercedes has done in its design on the interior. The exterior is kind of up to your own opinion. I would say the front looks pretty good. The back doesn't look very good, but it has gotten very mixed reviews when I've posted it on social media. Some people think it looks great, others think it looks absolutely awful, and honestly, I'm kind of on the fence of that as well. With so many like great looking electric cars on the market, it is very hard to say that the Mercedes EQS looks better. But when it comes to like the interior and the driving experience, I think it's second to none. I absolutely love the way that this car is able to travel around. I love the back space. I love picking people up in it and just like going for a quick ride and just going places that I usually wouldn't, just because I wanted to drive this car more in the week that I've had it. So when it comes to the charging, this car has an AC and DC option, similar to a lot of electric cars on the market. The AC charging time is 10 to 100% in 37 minutes, whereas the DC is about 10 to 80% in that 37-minute time frame. So it really does depend on your area, because what I found specifically is that if you have the proper charging setup, this is going to be an incredible experience. But in my case, I live in a condo that doesn't have a charger, so we use the public charging options, and that took overnight, like over 12 hours to be able to charge the car from about like 10% to about 100%. The good news is though, you're able to get over 500 kilometers in range, and in the week that I've had the car in temperatures of about 10 Celsius, it has been perfectly accurate in terms of that claim, just based on my own rough estimates as well. I have been driving mostly in a customized individual mode that mostly has the settings set to the comfort option, with exception of the sound being set to sport.